evening and welcome to City Limits. My name's Norman McCourt, your host of City Limits, the show that provides you with information about the people, places, and events that shape the character of our community. Joining me tonight is State Senator Gina Walsh, District 13.
Hello,
Welcome
Mr. Mayor.
again.
How you been?
I've been fine. I'm sure you're glad to be out of session now for a
I am. It was
break.
time for a little break and a reprieve, and we're finished until veto session in September.
Oh, hey, what, 2 whole months or 3 whole months, I
we
guess.
have we have about 8 weeks, 9 weeks off, and that's when we do a lot of our constituent work. Do a lot of work in the community, and actually it's a little busier than it is when you're in Jeff City. In Jeff City, you're concentrated on what's going on in that building, and you're constantly going to meetings and committee assignments in the Capitol, and that's pretty much an all day, all evening job, 4 or 5 days a week, and it's a schedule you get on. You're really kind of in a bubble, and it goes by really quick. Those 5 months fly by, but when you get here, you're more out in the community. And I was looking at the calendar today, and it fills up. You don't think it does. You wonder what you'll do during the interim, but there's lots of things to do and lots of people to see. And like, for example, to have this chat with you this morning.
Well, that's a good thing. It's good to talk to your
Absolutely, and there's a lot to talk about after this legislative session.
I can imagine. The one thing I mentioned, I did a show sometime in the middle of the session. I think it was with Tim Fisher, and we were talking about the misapprehension or the wrong idea people have of a legislator up there. They think it's a 9 to 5 job. I mean,
No.
I've talked to you at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. One time I talked with you, and it was like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And there was going to be another committee meeting after that.
Yeah.
So
it can go on. We have somebody that runs the Senate floor now, Senator Ron Richards. He likes to kind of keep us on a schedule, but then when we are finished with session, regardless of what time, if we have evening sessions, it may not finish till 9, but some of the committees have to meet after that because we have to meet when we are mandated. We can't meet during a session of the legislature. So if we're in chamber, you cannot have committee hearings going on. Now there is an exception towards the end of session. They might vote to suspend the rules if we have to have a conference committee report, which we would have on certain bills if we don't agree with the other chamber. And generally that would go on with the budget bills, of which I'm on the budget committee, so I was on the conference committee for all of those bills, but I believe transportation. And Senator Sifton was on the transportation bill because he had an issue in his district that he really was married to that he wanted to talk about in that committee.
Okay, well, it's a rigorous schedule, to
It
say
is,
the least.
but we know what we sign up for when we go in. When we ask the people to send us to Jeff City, we're aware of the time commitment and the sacrifices for us and our families. But it's also worthwhile, and it's a very fulfilling job. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I enjoy every minute of it, even the minutes that are very tense. And when you look back on them and you made it through them, you think, well, maybe that wasn't so bad, and maybe I learned something new from somebody else that I didn't necessarily agree with before I went into the discussion. So, it's a good thing when you have somebody that kind of challenges your ideas. Mm-hmm. Works out.
It's somewhat different in both chambers, too. I mean, the Senate operates a little differently than the House does.
Well,
because there's a lot less members, for one thing.
I just finished my second year in the Senate, and, the first year I was like just looking around and trying to learn and was so surprised at how different it was. And this year was a year where I learned to not work through the differences, but was able to use the differences to my advantage and to understand them. And it's a lot different than the House. You have the ability to filibuster if you don't like somebody else's idea. And that tool is not used very often. That you would think that every time you disagreed with somebody, you'd get up and filibuster. But you don't, because it would be like the kid that cried wolf. If you got up on every bill you disagreed with and wanted to talk it to death, you're going to lose your credibility. But we did. We staged a couple of filibusters on a couple of issues that we felt were important. My caucus did, important to their districts. And we ended up with compromise with quite a few things. This year we passed a criminal code bill, a revision of the criminal code bill, which hasn't been done in over 25 years. And we do have a lot of outdated, I'm sure you know that a lot of your laws that you guys pass here in Blackjack, you have to revisit them every once in a while and look at them and make sure that they apply the same way as they were intended 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And that's what we did. Now that bill doesn't go in effect until 2017, so because it was massive. It was, we called it the doorstop in our office because it was like this. So, and you muddle through that while you're sitting on the floor discussing other things. But the folks that worked on this, one from Senator from Springfield, Senator Dixon, and Senator Jolie Justice, one from each side of the aisle. Senator Justice represents the 10th district, which is right outside of St. Charles County, Warren, Callaway, Montgomery. She's actually from Kansas City and was districted into that district after redistricting. But they have worked on this her whole 8 years in the Senate. And she's termed out. So they finally passed it. It's a good bill. I think it's going to be good for our constituents. But as I said, it won't go into effect until 2017. And with things like that, you need to put a back date on them like that because when they're so large, mistakes can be made. And this would give them time, give folks time to iron out the wrinkles. And if there are any errors, they can be repaired before the bill goes into effect.
Yeah. So they got a good chance to codify it and everything too. Which
Exactly.
Is,
Exactly.
time. All right, let's talk about the session and some of the things, some of the highlights and I guess lowlights too. I mean, you got both sides.
Yeah, you do
depending
have
on
both
what
sides.
you look at. So let's just take them in basically categories. And let's start with medical. I know you had one medical.
I had
bill
a bill
that
that I carried last year and I carried this year. And it was, we called it the meningitis bill, and it was attached to an omnibus medical bill that did a lot of different things. But one of them that it does do, if the governor signs it, I think he has till the end of June to sign this bill. If he should sign it, would require that all incoming freshmen into our state universities must have a meningitis vaccination before they come into the school. That bill also has a date on it not to begin until a year from this August, so that Health and Senior Services can put everything, the rules together, and get everything in order for our universities. And a lot of people say, well, that's just another mandate. Well, if you are the parent of a kid that goes away to one of our campuses, especially first-time parents. I've put 3 kids through school, and they all chose to go on the western side of the state. So I was a little worried a lot of times when they'd call and say, I don't feel well. Sometimes you think, well, they're just doing what kids do on a Friday night. I met a young man a few years ago. His name was Andy Marceau, and he wrote a book called Working Through the Pain. Well, Andy was, the week before he was to graduate, I believe he was at K-State maybe. The week before Andy was to graduate, he didn't feel well, and he called his parents and they said, take some aspirin, go to bed, you probably got the flu, just rest and sleep it off. That was a Friday night. By Saturday night, the hospitals were calling Andy's parents and telling them to prepare for the worst. This disease is so fast moving, and I call it the silent disease because kids don't realize they have it, and neither, even if they're home, you may not realize they've had it. I've met nurses that there's a nurse in Kansas City that is was an advocate for my bill. She came up and testified. She was out bicycling on a Thursday night with her family, her young children and her husband, and by Saturday morning, they were telling her husband that she probably wasn't going to make it through the weekend. Mr. Marceau is a reporter up in Kansas somewhere. He came and testified on the bill. I read his book, and it really had an impact on me. He lost the fingers on his hands. It's just like a flesh-eating disease, but it's something we could prevent. It's something, it's like any other childhood disease that we can prevent with a vaccination. It does have a religious exemption in it, so we bent over backwards to try and get everybody through this that would have a reason not to want that bill. So hopefully the governor signs it and it becomes law, and it'll just be another tool in the toolbox to protect our kids.
Yeah, it sounds like a very useful, and
Yeah,
I know they had this in I think of Princeton University.
They
or
did
something.
this year, yeah.
They
We
had
used
an
that as an
outbreak of it.
example in committee. They had, I believe, 4 students. And people say, well, it doesn't happen very often. Well, when it's your child, once is enough.
Once is enough, yeah.
Absolutely. And who doesn't want to help our kids? It's like, to me, it's common sense legislation. Doesn't cost the state hardly anything. We really didn't have anybody this year because every time you go back with a bill, you change it when people have issues, and you work with the parties involved. We worked with the insurance lobby, we worked with the doctors, and we got the bill where it was acceptable to everyone. So, and
Good for you.
yeah.
Very good. What else in the medical area?
Well, we did not pass Medicaid expansion, and that is a philosophical discussion, I'll say. I support Medicaid expansion. It's something that the federal government, my idea was, let's do it, and then if it doesn't work, we can step back and look at it again, and the opposition says we can't afford it. Well, when you pass a $300 million tax decrease and then turn around and pass a tax increase on lower income families, of course you can't afford it. But the bottom line to Medicaid expansion is for the first 3 years, the federal government is going to pay for it. So that money is there now. My thought on it was, let's look at it every year, and after the 3rd year, if we can't afford it, if we can't sustain what the federal government was paying, because after the 3rd year, it's going to be reduced each year. More of the obligation will fall on the state. Well, then we stop. There's nothing saying that we can't stop and fall back. I forget what they said, but it was something like 24,000 jobs it would create. Who doesn't want these jobs?
Plus it's money we've given away, which
Yes.
doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense.
And the jobs, that's the field, is, medical insurance and billing. And every kid I talked to this year, I talked to 3 people in the last week. Well, what do? They're doing stuff with the medical industry. That's where it's going. It's computers, it's things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think we should have given it a shot, just to see, just to 3 years. 3 years, it wouldn't cost us anything, and then go from there.
Yeah. The way I look at it, if I'm walking down the street and any reasonable person's walking down the street, and there's a $10 bill laying on the sidewalk, they'll reach down and pick up that $10 bill, and they're not going to walk past that. No. It's free money. So why are we giving away free money?
And the way I look at it is free money, and I understand the other philosophy. I just happen not to agree with it. I just don't think that it's right mind thinking. But, that's why we're up there, to share our differences of opinion and to go from there. And hopefully, in the House there is a movement on both sides of the aisle to have some form of Medicaid expansion, and I think it just ran out of gas this year. Hopefully next year that bill will move a little bit and it'll change, and it'll be something that we can all be proud of. A lot of times we compromise on bills and we end up, there's several bills I've voted for where, I do not like the phrase hold your nose and vote for them, because I won't say that, because I knew what I was voting on. I didn't necessarily agree with the whole bill, but oftentimes I've worked on it really hard, and I understand that in this political climate, it's about compromise. And something sometimes is better than nothing. And when it doesn't work, I know it's harder to get rid of something once you have it, but that's what we're up there for, to make the hard decisions and to change things when they don't work. So a lot of times I vote for all of the budget bills except two. And the two I usually don't vote for are bills that concern mental health and health and senior services. And the reason being is because I don't believe that we fund them thoroughly enough. I don't think we put enough funding in there to take care of our senior citizens, our most vulnerable citizens. But you know me. You have been interviewing me since 2003, and you know how I feel about Bell Fountain Habilitation Center and folks with developmental disabilities. And I don't think that we as a state do enough to take care of those folks. So traditionally, I've always voted against those bills, and that's more of a statement than anything, or more of a, my little form of protest. But every year things get better in that area, and
maybe someday you'll
yeah,
vote for it.
maybe
you'll get there
someday
and someday
I
you'll
will
vote for it.
support all the bills.
Yeah.
But in being on the budget committee, I work hard with the other members from my side of the aisle, as well as the folks from the other side of the aisle and the chairman. That's a tough committee. I was honored to be asked to be on it, but after about the third week of session, it meets every day. And after it meets every day for 2 weeks, it meets every day for twice a day. And then after that, towards the end, it's meeting 3 times a day. So you're jumping in and out of there besides your other committee assignments the whole time. But it's very fulfilling, it's worthwhile, and that's where I can put the input in for our district. If there's ever anything that we need specifically for the 13th district, that's where we do it. This year, my project was a mentoring project for underserved youth. So we got some money added to that, and there's some programs that are going to be funded that wouldn't necessarily have been funded otherwise if the governor signs the bill.
So, sounds good. Let's move on to education. That was another big one.
That's still a big one, and that is the bill I voted for that I didn't necessarily agree with all of the points in it. Last summer, we began, myself and every senator was at the table that represents a portion of St. Louis County, Jefferson County, and St. Charles County. So that was the entire St. Louis delegation. I think in the end, there was 5 or 6 of us left. When we went into session, we had, I believe, Senate Bill 409, which was the same bill. It was 5 people filed the same bill. They were all from the St. Louis region. There were several things in there that I liked that would help the transfer program. What people don't understand, especially when you're home in the district, I as a senator represent receiving districts as well as sending districts. My school districts are Hazelwood, Ferguson, Florissant, a little bit of Jennings, and Riverview Gardens. So
you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, we are right in the middle of it, and that doesn't, that's okay. But when you're making these decisions, you have to think about all of the kids in all of the districts and how it will affect them. And the transfer program it's bleeding. The failing districts will never have a chance to survive with the law that was in place because it was just bleeding the districts. Now, I was very disappointed last week when Commissioner of Education came out and she said that the Normandy School District will no longer pay the full amount of tuition to the other districts that they were paying. I think she capped it at like $7,300 or something per student. That's wonderful, and I really was encouraged by that for Normandy. I was saddened that it wouldn't affect Riverview Gardens, because if we continue to hold Riverview Gardens to the old standards, they're going to keep hemorrhaging money for the kids that left, and the majority of the kids that stayed. What about them? Who educates them and who supports them? So our tax dollars are going to these other districts. Now, what about the people that are receiving those students? Is it fair that we send less money than what they're spending per pupil? So you can see how complicated the issue is. The one part about the bill that I do not like is it opens the door for a voucher program. Now, we tightened that up a lot. We tightened it up greatly. But once you open that door on things, the door is open, and it's very difficult to close that door. People have often assumed that I should support a voucher program because I was not educated. I went to the public school till I was in 5th grade. And then I went to parochial schools. My parents chose a faith-based education for myself and my siblings. And I chose the same for my kids. But our job as state legislators is to fund public education and to provide education for all the kids. So I have never supported a program this is the first time I've ever supported any form of a bill that would open that door. You know, and on the flip side of that, as somebody who went to a parochial school, I wouldn't want, people say they have it in other parts of the country. Yes, they have it in other parts of the country. My parents sent me to a Catholic grade school in Spanish Lake because they wanted me to learn my faith. Well, you know what? Kids in other parts of the country that have vouchers, they learn their faith at 4 o'clock when the other kids go home. I don't want somebody coming in and dictating to my parochial schools what their curriculum will be. And when you take tax money, you have to open the door to that as well. Because, it's part of public money, and we have a separation of church and state, so they have to walk that fine line with that, and that's one of the ways that they've done that in other parts of the country, and I don't know that I agree with that. I understand that our kids, some people feel our kids don't spend enough time in school, but there's a lot to be said for the family unit and the time that you take away from there when you have a kid staying at school 2 or 3 hours after the regular school day.
Okay, well, that the voucher program was the biggest, with the biggest, I guess, controversy of that particular thing. But, it tended to overshadow, I think, a lot of the good parts
stuff
of the bill.
in it. Yeah, it did, and that's. We'll go back. I'm sure that there's going to be some. I think there's been lawsuits filed, and of course. I don't know if they'll be sustained because I don't know if they have the money to sustain them. But we'll find out. You have to give something a chance to work before you can say it doesn't work. And we'll see what happens.
This is going to be an ongoing
It is.
situation.
It is going to be an ongoing battle. It's with everything else. When you don't have the money to fund something, you can't. You don't have the money to fund. You have broken roads because you don't have you're not bringing in the tax dollars to fund them. Hancock had a lot to do with these things when we capped our taxes that we could take in. I don't like paying a lot of taxes either, like anybody else, but you have got to be able to pay for the services we all come to expect. People do not look at safe roads as a luxury. I just got back from Barranquilla, Colombia, and they are thrilled with their new highway. Their idea of a new highway was it looked just like Lindbergh. That was their new highway. To us, that's just a main thoroughfare. That is a major highway that you take going from Barranquilla, Colombia to Cartagena, which is about the distance between here and Columbia, Missouri. And that's what the major highway looks like halfway there. It's only halfway finished. But it was interesting to see the differences between the two countries, and I have to tell you, I'm grateful for everything we have here.
Yeah, if you're not from another country or have extensively traveled in other countries, you really don't realize what good things we have here.
I did not appreciate it even when my son-in-law is from Colombia, and when he lived here with us, I was like, it's a road, William. It's a highway. The appreciation he had for that, his one thing was he couldn't wait for his father to come to the United States. His father also happened to be an elected official. He was a state representative there. He couldn't wait for his father to get here to see our highway system. because they fund theirs much differently than we do. And when they run out of money for the road stops right where it is, and they don't continue until they have more money for it. So we are.
That might be a good approach, though.
You know, it's a good approach, but I've got a couple pictures of roads that just go like this, make a turn, and that's the end of it. But it is, it's a growing economy down there, and a lot of construction going on. So they're doing well, but it gave me a new appreciation for what we do have here in this country. Yeah, it really did. And I know I'm getting off the subject of what we were talking about, but I was so taken back by some of the things I seen. And I have a new appreciation to my daughter. I said something about renting a car because most people don't have automobiles down there, and the kids have a real small car, and there was 6 of us. So half the time we some of us rode in the car and some of us were in taxis. And she told me, Mom, you do not want to rent a car down here. You are not capable of driving down here. And when your 26-year-old daughter dictates to you, that you're kind of taken back. But once I was down there and seen the situation, I was more than happy just to sit back and relax and hold on and let somebody else do the driving. All right. Yeah, it was different. Everything is in roundabouts. So wherever you go, there's several of the roundabouts, and it's nobody yields. You just kind of take your chances when you're trying to, and I guess you get accustomed to how they operate. I would have I never seen one accident when I was down there. I was shocked. I was down there 10 days, and I was like, I can't believe I haven't seen an accident, but it was what it was.
I was in Mexico City one time, and you talk about drivers down in Latin American countries. We was going from the airport to the hotel in the taxi, and what they do is when they go to pass somebody, they might be going like 40 miles an hour behind this guy. When they go to pass him, they speed up. When they get to about 70, they pull out.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you.
And they're constantly honking the horns.
Oh, yeah.
Always beeping the horns, which I found was interesting. To tell you how, we never use our horns over here that much. And my 3-year-old granddaughter was with us, and when she said, "What is that?" We had to explain, it's the horn on the car. But it's just a different culture, and it works for them. But I'm grateful for the things we have in this country and the laws that govern us, and I have a new appreciation for why they're in place. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 other topics to talk about: transportation, budget, and munis. Can I invite you back next month to pick up the final 3?
Absolutely. Did we run through our time
We
already?
actually have run through our time.
Wow.
The first 2 topics were, there was a lot of stuff there.
There was a lot of stuff that went on, and I hope that maybe the powers that be will let you expand your broadcast sometime, Mr. Mayor, and go from 30 to 60.
Well, 60 minutes is a long time to talk and to keep the viewers interested.
That's true, too. You know
part.
more about it than I do, but it was great coming to see you again, and I hope to come back next month.
You bet. Thanks, Gina.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Mayor.
Thank you for watching our show this evening. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me at www.cityofblackjack.com or call me at area code 314-355-0400. And there will be on the screen, you had seen contact information for Senator Walsh. Thanks again, Gina. Good evening.
Thank you.